Welcome. Welcome everybody. My name is Rusty. This is my channel where I discuss my favorite horror movies and heavy metal music and other forms of aggressive rock, but let's see if I've got everything ready. Okay. Welcome to another episode of Scream with me, where tonight I want to talk about a little foreign independent horror movie that I found. It's an indie vampire film from Argentina, and it's called Children of the Night. Okay. Now, Children of the Night isn't, like I said, an Argentine independent film. It's a vampire film. It stars María Giunta, Toto Muñoz, and Sabrina Ramos, and it was directed by Iván Noel, and it was released in 2014. The original title from there was Limbo, and you'll find out why. And so, I really love this movie. This movie was, I heard about it on a forum, and I took a bit to track it down. I managed to find it actually on Walmart online. Had a few copies that they were selling, so that's where I got mine. And it is on eBay, but it was a tad less expensive on Walmart, but they only had a couple, so I grabbed it. This movie, it doesn't look cheap or anything. You can tell that they filmed it with indie cameras, certainly not theatrical cameras, but it doesn't really show that bad. It's not like it looks like found footage or anything like that. It's perfectly fine. And so let's get into the story. This is the story of Alice. Alice is a journalist who, because of being adopted out when she was a child, she has a soft spot for missing children. And she began to notice had been noticing a rather large number of unsolved missing children cases in a certain area of Argentina. And I guess what made her notice it was the fact that these were unsolved. No bodies, no finding them, nothing. They were just gone and stayed gone. Now, while she's noticing this, she also, while she's researching it, she also notices another story on an orphanage in that area called Limbo. And it stated that it was a place where children with a blood disorder were cared for. And this, again, interested her because she is a hemophiliac. She's got hemophilia. So she decides that she wants to kill two birds with one stone and wants to go and not only check out this area of missing children, but check out this orphanage called Limbo. So that's where she goes. Now, her boyfriend, he really puts in to go with her, but she doesn't want him to go with her. So, she goes by herself. Now, it's secluded out in the middle of nowhere. So, you're talking about she arrives, she takes a trolley, but she's still got a way to go, and they just drop her off out in the middle of nowhere on this really deserted back road. And she's walking down it, and even then you kind of get the creeps because of the location. I mean, it just looks like a scary place. I know I wouldn't want to be walking down this dark road with only a light, a street lamp every once in a while. And all of a sudden she thinks she hears something behind her, and she turns around, and when she turns back around, there's this angelic little boy standing in front of her, looks about 12. And it kind of scares the shit out of her, and you as well. And I love the way that they dress in this movie. They all are wearing this angelic white It looks like a teenage version of a christening outfit for a child. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. So she's like, who are you? And he says, who are you? You're beautiful and stuff like that. And she's like, okay, whatever. And she says that she's there to go to Limbo. And he asks her, can he take her luggage? She says, sure. And he walks her on to the place. Now, when she gets there, she's introduced to the matron, who's this very large woman. I didn't really like her at first, but I kind of grew to like her because she's kind of creepy. But once the story unfolds, there's a lot creepy going on. But so she says, that it's too late to talk. The girl's tired and stuff like that. So she gives her a room, and she goes to bed. The next day, she gets up and she notices that, there's really nobody around but the matron. So she does a little interview with her where she's asking about the children. What do you do here? What's your work? And this was the first laugh that I got in the movie. There is comedy sprinkled throughout the movie to break the seriousness, because it's a very... There's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of serious subject matter, and yet there's these little comedic elements thrown in, and the first time that I laughed was, she's like, well, what disease did these children have? And she says that they have a disease called Transylvirus. And I'm like, did she really say Transylvirus? Like Transylvanian virus? I mean, come on. That gave me a giggle because I'm like, well, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? What could, a Transylvirus? Okay. All right. That's all right. We're still good. I mean, the movie's looking good. It's all right. And, the woman's like, well, how? Do all of them have it? Well, yeah, we think it's a Hungarian strain, which was another little laugh. It's a Hungarian strain of Transylvirus. And, the woman asks, Alice asks, is it contagious? And she's like, oh, no. Well, kinda. It just depends. And it's left like that. And you're like, okay, I get it. I get the little subtle. The comedy in it's very subtle, but, so the woman, when night falls, the woman is taken out and she's introduced to the children. Well, actually, right before night falls, the matron takes them into the big bunk rooms and shows them all asleep and explains to her that one of the symptoms of this disease is photosensitivity to light. Duh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, considering that they're fucking vampires, yeah. But of course she doesn't know that. She's introduced to the kids, and it was kind of really interesting to see the kids doing what we normally do in the daytime. They're doing lawn work, they're mowing the grass, they're hanging out clothes and all of this stuff in the middle of the night. And Alice immediately starts to notice some weird things, like the one boy, the one that met her on the road. She asks him, she's like, how old are you? And he says that he was 33. And she's like, okay. And, she's like noticing how all of the kids, they're not quite acting like children. They seem to be carrying themselves more like adults, and so she definitely notices that, and that kind of makes her wonder what's going on. So as we continue to move on, she's introduced around to all of these kids. The kids continue to talk to her and vice versa, which she thinks is pretty interesting. And they really are a fascinating bunch of kids. And I'm sorry, I'm being distracted. But okay, where was I? So now we have her being introduced to the kids. You have all of this stuff about, um, them living at night, um, everything going on of that nature. When she suddenly notices that there's one kid out of the whole bunch, everybody dresses the same. They're all dressed in these beautiful, pristine, white, christening looking outfits. And there's one kid, though, that dresses in all black. And he really, pretty quickly to me, he kind of, Isaac from Children of the Corn, the leader of the kids in Children of the Corn, I really got vibes from him. And another really fascinating thing about this movie is I think the casting was fantastic. These kids all look, um, well, they're really pretty kids. All of them are really beautiful, but at the same time, they chose a lot of kids that these kids look innocent. They look like perfect little kids, but they all have this look of danger, like they're hiding something, like they're a little dangerous, a little dark or something. So that's pretty, that's pretty interesting to see. Is that's one of the first things that I noticed about the movie is how the kids all look very beautiful, but something's up with them. So we continue to move on. She's getting to know these kids, and as this scene and that scene, goes about, she begins to learn more and more about them. And something in the back of her head, though, she's getting these little flashes of, you really look familiar, like this one looks familiar and that one looks familiar. And she can't really shake this feeling. It's just like this feeling. And she even tells the matron that some of these kids look familiar, and the matron just blows it off. That's one of the things I really got to like the matron about. She was very smarmy. It's sort of like, oh, it's fine. You're not, it's just in your head. You're just noticing things that, it's just your imagination. There's nothing really going on. And that was kind of interesting. So as you get to notice, if you get to know the kids, like she's getting to know the kids, the next night it gets even stranger because, first of all, she finds two of them kissing, making out behind a tree, and that shocks her. The one that met her at the beginning on the road, he really says some inappropriate stuff to her, tells her that she has really nice breasts, and she's like, okay. Um, and so she ends up asking the matron again, she's like, some of these kids, like, why do, these kids are, I don't know, I'm just noticing that these kids are acting very, like, mature. Some of the things that they say and the way they're looking at me and stuff, it's just, they're not acting like kids. And once again, she gets the blow off from the matron that, no, everything's fine. And it happens pretty quickly that she really notices they don't really drag it out too much as far as the mystery where she's concerned, because she's a smart woman. She's a journalist. She's the actress is playing her is really good. So she doesn't take a lot of time before she's like demanding, of the matron that you're bullshitting me. Something's going on here, and I don't really know what it is. And then, I think it was probably within like 25 minutes of the movie, she kind of has a showdown with her where she's basically, ask her, I know something's going on. And here's how I know. Some of these kids, I have seen their picture. I have seen their wanted poster, or their missing child poster. You are doing something wrong here. These kids don't belong here. You kidnapped them. She starts getting really upset. And her boyfriend had showed up, the one that wanted to come, but he left pretty quickly because she didn't want nothing to do with him. She didn't want him there to begin with, so he left pretty quickly. He was only there for about 5 minutes of the movie. I think he spent one night, and then the next day he left. So once she realized that a lot of these kids were on missing posters, she really then did kind of confront the matron, who went about telling her that she tried the "you're just imagining it" thing again, and she really put her foot down and was like, "No, I'm not." So, and I didn't expect this, but the matron basically just leaned back and said, "I'm going to come clean with you." And I was like, uh-oh. And she basically just sat back and told her. She's like, "These are all the children. These are all the chosen ones. These are the children of God. These are the chosen ones. And you may know that to mean a vampire." So the girl, Alice is like, "Do you think I'm going to buy that shit?" And the woman's just like, starts telling her the story. She starts saying that it's against the rules for vampires to feed off children or turn children. Now, you might remember that from Anne Rice's. That's also a law in the Anne Rice vampire universe, is that you're not supposed to create child vampires. Well, it turns out that in this universe, that's true too. So she starts explaining to Alice that these children are not missing. They have been changed into vampires. It is her duty to watch them. She watches over them and cares for them, these poor children who have been turned into vampires by what she calls naughty adult vampires, who are not supposed to be doing that. And yet they're making child vampires, and they're hated, and they're not accepted, and somebody has to look out for them. Now, of course, Alice is like, you're full of shit, completely. And that's when the matron brings in a girl and says, "Look at her teeth." So Alice looks at her teeth, and she's got these fangs, and she continues to tell the story. And I thought that it was so fascinating because they're really doing a good job at explaining this universe to you, in an attempt to get this woman to calm down. And you can't leave. The secret, and you can leave later if you want to, but you really need to understand what's going on here. So there she is explaining to them how these children are, quote, illegally created by adult vampires, and there's no one to take care of them. So that's where they are. Now, this is one, I think, this is a fascinating fact that I found in it. She looks at her, she's got Alice almost believing it, and then she looks at her, she says, "You people are so stupid. How many children in our country disappear every year?" And Alice says 400. So, they're talking about Argentina, of course. And she said, "And how many worldwide?" And, the woman is like, about 50,000 worldwide disappear every year. And the woman just starts laughing. The matron starts laughing at her and goes, "That's a lot of acid baths. Where do you think all of these kids are? There's only a fraction of them that are found. There's only a fraction of their bodies." Exactly, you, I think she calls them bourgeois. You bourgeois media, you have nothing but sex and death on your mind, and you don't see any possibility for the fact that there are tens of thousands of children who disappear without a trace, that are not found. Hello, welcome to limbo, because this is where some of them are going. So you really kind of stop and go, huh, that makes sense. And that's what Alice did. She was basically like, oh, that really does make sense, because here they are. So now she goes back out that night, and she's got like this another meeting with all of the children. And there's probably like 60 there, 50. So, now she's like meeting them all again, and they're all coming up to her now because everybody knows she knows their secret. So she's sort of welcomed into the family, and they all are coming up, and they're very proud of their teeth, and look at my teeth, and mine's not, mine's only just now coming out, because it turns out that in their universe, when a child is changed into a vampire, it takes a while for their teeth to grow, their fangs to grow. So she met different children in different stages of teeth growth. And this whole time you're going, I've never seen a vampire movie where they're like approaching it like this. But, I kind of like that. I mean, if I ran into a nest of vampires, it would be really interesting if they sat you down and explained everything to you. Sort of like Louis, like Armand did with Louis that one time, when he met Louis, and he explained to him what he was. And, and you have to remember, during Interview with a Vampire and the Anne Rice Chronicles, the Vampire Chronicles, at the beginning, that's all Louis, that's all Louis wanted, right? Was he wanted, I don't understand our people. Can you tell me about our people? And that's what, remember, Lestat got really mad at him because, he was like, well, I don't have the answers for you. So, yeah, that was pretty neat. So, them taking that kind of approach where they were, telling you the history and kind of giving you the backstory of this particular situation, I thought that was very cool. I really liked that. So, and this is where a little bit of the humor came into it as well, because the kids were like, they were just kids, and she's going around and is like, how old are you? And it's like, I'm really 8. And then she would ask another, and they're like, I'm 37 and I'm 42. And she met this, she walked up to these twin girls, and, she's like, how old are you? And they were like, we're 80. So, these children are of all different ages, yet they are the age that they were created when they were transformed. So that was all very, very interesting, and later on they continued that. Now, of course, in the meantime, you're getting to notice the dynamic, especially with the Count. That is what the little boy in black is called. He's called the Count. That's him, right there on the top. He's the Count. That's what they call him. So, in the meantime, they're throwing in little, it's almost like educational stuff, She walks in on the matron, and she's like, got a big pole, and she's trying to do, and, Alice is like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm trying to get her down, and this little girl is just floating up there in midair, and the woman's like, she sleepwalks. So she's floating across the roof, and the woman's trying to wake her up so that she would come down and get back in bed. That was funny. I mean, I thought that was like cute, And a couple of them, like, because she's got her little camera, so a couple of them wanted to do a commercial for her, and they did a Colgate commercial, like, hi, make your teeth as white as they can be, and she's showing off her fangs, and got to use Colgate to keep your fangs, really good. And this little boy was standing beside her, and he's like, it's like, so there's little sprinkles of that, despite the fact that this movie is scary as shit, got a lot of gore in it, and yet it's got this really comedic stuff in it. So that's really funny. So yeah. So now we have the Count, and what's another? now that she knows that, now that she knows that, she's more open with the matron in their discussions and interview. And I think one of the other kind of humorous things that, well, it's kind of rude actually, but kind of humorous, is um, the girl asked her a question. She was like, Alice asked her, why did these adult vampires do this illegal thing? If it's illegal in your culture, in your racial culture, why did these adults do this when it's illegal? And I loved the matron's response to it. And that was, she looked at her and she said, because she's always looking at her like, you're so silly. The questions you're asking are so obvious. Um, the answer should be so obvious. And yet I'm like going, hey, I don't know either. Tell me. So I'm like, quit being rude to her for asking questions I'd like to know the answer to, because I've watched so many vampire movies, I've never like really wondered. So I'm like, yeah, Alice is really asking questions I'd like to know. So Alice asked her that, and the woman turned around and she said, tell me why you humans eat lamb. And when she said that, I was like, okay, she's right. That is a very obvious answer to an obvious question. Why do these adult vampires do that? Go against and break the law and make child vampires? For the same reason that you humans eat lamb instead of letting them grow up. It's all that needs to be said, right? Okay. So, what's another another really good educational one was, now that of course she knows all of this, she's like talking to the kids all in the bedroom, and they're gathered around her, and they're acting so giddy about being vampires, and she's asking them all these questions like a good interviewer would. And another really good one that I liked was when she asked them, doesn't it get boring drinking blood all the time? I mean, no cake, no cookies, no, anything like that. Doesn't drinking blood get boring day after day? And the kids, almost like the matron does, kind of looked at her and was like, you're so silly. What do you mean? You do know, right, that there are so many different kinds of blood. Male, female, A positive, B positive, and she like went around the room when they told her that, she's like, what do you like? The guy's like, oh, I like O positive blood. It tastes, and then this other one was like, I like diabetic blood. I love to feed off a diabetic because the blood is so sweet. And then there's this one kid he was like, I like old blood, so I like, to middle-aged people. And the other one was like, I like kids' blood. And so they like basically were saying that there are like so many different varieties of blood, human blood, and they all taste differently. So you're kind of silly for thinking that blood is blood, and that we would be bored drinking blood every day, because there's so many different kinds of blood and they all taste vastly different. And I'm like, I never thought of that either. And so that was pretty cool. So that's some of the comedic little things that you see in a movie. There's others, but it's little stuff like that that I think really sets this movie apart, in the vampire genre, is that, why hasn't anyone ever answered this stuff in like bigger vampire movies? So this asked some really interesting questions, and the kids really provided some really interesting answers. So, and then, oh yeah, kind of one of the most disturbing things I think the matron told her was when, back when she was asking her about why the adult vampires do this, and why do they feed on children. One of the things that she said, which is a little, I don't know if I can say this, but, it was kind of, 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 it was kind it kind of makes you go, ooh, did she just say that? Was, she said, the best way to protect your, kid, because like I just said, it's the same reason that you humans eat lamb. The best reason, or the best way to protect your children from being taken by an adult vampire is to make, to grow ugly and fat kids. Because, don't let them be beautiful, because a vampire will spot them and want to drink their blood. And you're like, ooh, okay. That was a little inappropriate, wasn't it? That was definitely not politically correct, okay? But, so yeah. So now let's get on to the story. During one of those little outings, one of the little kids had to go use the bathroom. And this is the introduction of the villains, I guess, according to which side you want to be on. But one of these little kids runs to the edge of the woods to use the bathroom of the property. And some dude in black, all black, grabs them. And the next day, everybody's really sad. And Alice asks, the matron, what's going on? And the matron says that one of their own had succumbed to the illness. And I was like, no, they're talking about that kid that was snatched. Then here's the introduction. You get introduced to these vampire hunters. They can't come on the property, but they hang out in the outskirts of the woods trying to kill vampires, trying to kill these children. So now you get introduced to this really dark element, because you've had 30 minutes of really falling in love with these vampire kids, and there hasn't really been anything threatening, you know what I mean, about the movie so far. It's kind of been very interesting, very hypnotic, very seductive, but there really wasn't any dark element to the movie, aside from just hints. Now things start getting dark, because this kid was killed. It shows a couple of other kids who have, which is against the rules, who have left the property and went to the camp where these vampire hunters are. And they are grabbed and murdered. And I am talking not off screen. They stake one of them and they cut the head off of the other one, and this is on screen, and you're like, okay, things have taken a turn in this movie. And things are getting a little alright. So the next night, the Count, the little boy that wears black, he's walking through town, but he's not wearing black this time. He looks like a normal little kid. And he walks up to two of those guys who are walking down the street, and he says he's lost, and can they help him find his parents? So the guys were like, I think they were suspicious that this might be a vampire, but they weren't sure. So they went and they sat down on a bench, and they handed him an ice cream, but he would never take a bite of the ice cream. So it's a really tense scene, because these guys are figuring out that this is a vampire, and they're trying to get out their weapons, and they're going to kill him. But he's way ahead of that, right? He already knows that, because he's the one out for blood, not them. He knows who they are. He knows he's here for revenge, because he's the leader. Two of his children have been taken and murdered by this group. So it's really cool that they, we would never hurt a child. And then one of them screamed, but you're not a child. And he tried to stake him, but the boy flew up in the air, jumped back down on him, staked one of them, killed the other one. A bunch of his little vamps come out of the woods, and these kids ripped them to shreds. It was, yeah. We've gone into a different realm. So now you're learning about the Count the next day, or the next night. she attends one of his lectures where he's talking to his children, or his, well, you know, I mean, they're not his children, but you know what I'm saying. He's the leader, and he is like holding up Dracula, the book by Bram Stoker, and he's like, you know, in my grandfather's biography, and Alice is like, what? And she's like, isn't that Bram Stoker's book, you know? And the kids are like, shh, don't say that. You don't speak his name. And he throws the book on the ground, and he said, written by a heretic. Okay. So now you find out this lovely pieces of information. This kid is the grandson, the legitimate bloodline grandson of Count Dracula. And Bram Stoker was a vampire. He hates Bram Stoker because Bram Stoker betrayed their people. Remember Lestat? He formed the rock band. That's what pissed off the Queen of the Damned, was because he exposed their people. We're in the same situation. This kid is the grandson of Count Dracula. Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was a vampire who betrayed his people by writing Dracula. And even though he was dead now, he was killed by the vampires for doing that. His son, who is a half vampire, is the leader of the vampire hunters. So we have, no pun intended, we have a blood feud between the grandson of Count Dracula and the son of Bram Stoker, who are on opposite sides. Now, the son of Bram Stoker, he hasn't told his people that he's half vampire. So, and the kid doesn't even bother, the Count. He goes to their encampment and invites them to come get him. He's like, come get me. Now, remember, Bram Stoker's grandson, or son, and his vampire hunters, he himself, they can't come onto the property because it's protected by the power. So they can't come onto the property without invitation. He shows up and gives them an invitation. And the guy, and you know, Bram Stoker's son is like, oh, I see you took revenge very quickly, you know, killing those two kids by killing his two servants. So he's like, I see you took revenge very quickly. And the boy's like, and as a matter of fact, you know, this has went on too long. Why don't you come and get me? So a baptism was coming up. When a child vampire is turned into a vampire and his teeth grow, he's only allowed to drink animal blood. When he graduates into the permission to drink human blood, there is a baptism that is performed, which was kind of neat. So there was this upcoming baptism. So she's been there for 2 months. Because when she first arrived, there was a baptism coming up in 2 months. The kids told her. One of them was going to be baptized and become able to feed off human blood. So this kid, he has now invited that pack of vampire hunters to, you know, come get me. So they have the baptism, and they're having a party in a closed, secluded barn with a certain type of blood on it to where the people couldn't get into it. It allowed them to be outside during the sun in this closed barn. So the Count isn't there, though. He's inside. And they're having this big party, including Alice, are having this big party in the barn for the baptism of one of the kids. When these people surround the barn and start chopping holes in it with axes and stuff. And another little comedic thing that pops up is, you ever seen those drills, the Dremels or something, with the drill on the end of it? One of them has a wooden stake on the drill, and it's like, okay, that's funny. But so they're tearing down the walls. They're trying to get in to the thing. They drag one of them out into the sun where he is burned alive in front of the matron, who is tied up in a chair. And she's looking up at the sky. And you see the Count sitting inside. And you're wondering, oh my God, are they going to kill all of them? They're tearing the barn down with all these vampire kids in it. And all of a sudden, as the matron is, she's tied to a chair and she's looking up at the sky, because even though, hemophiliacs cannot be turned, can't have a vampire who bleeds like that. So if you got hemophilia, you can't be a vampire, or the conversion won't work. You can only be partially a vampire. So the sun is not burning her up, but it is going to kill her, if something doesn't happen. And but she's not going to burn up like the vampire kids did. She's just going to die from it. So she's looking up at the sky, and then all of a sudden she starts smiling, and they show the sun, and there's an eclipse happening. There's an eclipse coming. And you're like, oh shit. And then you see the Count, the little kid in black, the leader. You see him in the house looking at the cracks in the door, seeing the sunlight fade, and he starts smiling. It was a trap. You see, Bram Stoker's son and his little band of killers, or vampire hunters, they didn't know what he knew. He invited them to come. He let them know there was going to be a baptism. He let them know when to come. And what they didn't know that he did was that there was going to be an eclipse. So he got them all to show up. And in the meantime, stepping back, before this all happened that night, because this happened the next morning, his cat can turn into a bat, which is fucking cool. And he put a note on the cat. He put a note that was basically asking for reinforcements, because the matron had told this woman that just in Argentina alone, there were 12 limbos. So there were 11 other orphanages just in Argentina taking care of abandoned vampire children. So he had put a note asking for reinforcements on the cat, and threw the cat out the window, which turned into a bat and flew on, and that was fucking cool. So, the cat turned into a bat and flew away to go get help. So now, we're back. The eclipse is happening. Only one kid got killed, was dragged out and burned. And, so the vampire hunters, they all stop, because they realize they have just been fucked, because this eclipse is happening fast. And all of a sudden, it's black, it's dark. There's an eclipse going on. And in those few minutes, the kids, they all come out. The little Count, he puts on his grandfather, Count Dracula's cape, and he's walking out there amongst them. At the same time, you see this giant swarm of bats come, and they come over the field where this is taking place, and they're all in the trees. So you got the vampire kids from the barn behind them from this limbo, and you got all the vampire hunters, and then over there in the line of trees, all of these bats are landing in the trees, And I was like, okay. And then, so as they get close to the tree line, they see what's going on. And all of a sudden, all of these kids start dropping out of the trees in front of them, along with the cat. He drops down too, which was, again, fucking cool. So they're surrounded now. In front of them is all the reinforcement children in all their beautiful white christening outfits. And then behind them is the ones from the barn. Unfortunately, the matron is dead, sitting in the chair. Um, and the count walks out. The cinematography for this scene was especially nice because it switches to an overhead view, and here are all of these vampire hunters in their little black get-ups, and they are being surrounded by these pristine white angelic looking children who encircle them. And then the count screams, "Attack." Mm. And they do. And it is fucking a bloodbath. You understand me? There's kids running around with hands hanging out of their mouth. There's there is a lot of gore, but acceptable, good gore, not bad gore. Um, these kids rip all these people to hell and damnation. I mean, it was really cool. So you're like left um, wondering, oh wow, okay. So this all takes place in like 5 minutes, because that's it's an eclipse. It's not going to last that long. So they rip all of these guys to shreds, and I'm gonna step back for a second. Remember I told you that her boyfriend showed up? One of the things that we find out is that when he left that night, he was actually taken by the count, the little kid, and put down in a basement where he had been tortured. They put a spigot, like a beer faucet. I don't know what they're called. Like in a bar, you have the faucet, the tap. They put a tap. They put a tap in him, and they had been torturing him the whole time that you thought that he was gone. Him and the kids had been going down there and drinking out of the tap. And doing various other torturous things to him. Remember I told you there was comedy spread here and there? One of the comedy things was that they were making him wear a girl's bikini. So you've got this guy hanging there in a girl's bikini, and they're taking videos and pictures of him wearing these little panties and top, and making him pose, otherwise they're going to turn the tap on. And so yeah, that was gross but funny. Okay, so no, I'd forgotten about that. I saw it on my notes. And before I move on, let me see if there's anything else. I think I got everything. But I'd forgotten about Gabriel, her boyfriend, being put on tap in the basement. And I can't tell you how interesting it looks to see a person standing there with a tap sticking out of their top of their belly. That was pretty. That was fucked up. Yeah, okay, I think I got everything. As you can see, I really liked this movie. It brought like a tear to my eye. As you can see, I really liked this movie. This movie just like had so many interesting elements that I have not seen in a vampire movie, and that was it. Um, so, like I said, they managed to kill that whole herd of thing, and as far as the face-off between the Count and Bram Stoker's son, he blood boiled him, and it blinded him. Because that's how he could kill people. He was so powerful that he could like blood boil you. You didn't like burst or into flame or anything. He would just like blood. He could blood boil you, turn your, and your eyes would like bleed and ears and stuff. That was his way of killing. He could kill you with blood boiling you with his mind. So yeah, he managed to do that, and he let the guy live though. He let Bram Stoker's, he let him live, but it was after he had blinded him and burnt him, because his eyes were all burnt from the blood boil and stuff. But I guess because he was half vampire, he could take a lot more punishment than a human would have. And plus the boy stopped. And he said, you will wear the scars of a traitor for the rest of your life. Because the guy did turn to him and say, please don't kill me. You wouldn't kill a blood brother, a vampire brother. And I thought to myself, kill that motherfucker. What do you mean? I don't care whether you're a vampire or not. You've been slaughtered a bunch of my people. Oh, no, hell no. But he's the count. That was his decision, I guess. He let him live with the scar, to live with the scars of a traitor. He said, you will live with the scars of a traitor for the rest of your life. So, that was the end of the movie. The epilogue would have been when the woman and the boy, whom I will tell you, their little relationship. Let's spring back one more time. There was one thing I forgot. The kid, the one that had complimented her breast and said he was 33. When she was a child living with an abusive father, before they understood her disease, which was hemophilia, she was literally dying. And this kid from down the street was sneaking in and helping feed her and take care of her, because this guy was so ashamed of her disease, he was letting her die. I mean, I don't know anything about hemophilia, but I mean, I know what it is. But what I'm saying is I don't know why anybody would be embarrassed to have a hemophiliac for a kid. It's not like leprosy or something. I don't understand. But in any event, the father was a piece of crap who was letting his daughter lie, and this kid was taking care of her. And the father came in and caught him and shot him, and he ran across the field where the two guys that the father told to go chase him down and kill him, to finish him off, they were killed by the Count and the vampires, and they turned him, who was almost dead, into a vampire. So that's how he became a vampire, and that's where she remembered him from, as the little boy who helped her when she was the same age as him. Now, that relationship was a little... I understand that he's 33. I understand that he was the kid that she had a crush on that helped her. But you're still talking about a 33-year-old woman and a 12-year-old kid. And the stuff he is saying to her, like, he even asked her, can we... And she's like, no. Because I remember when he asked her that question, and I was like, oh no, don't go there. I know you're not going to go there. Okay, this has been a pretty interesting movie, but please don't go there. But even though they didn't go there, they got pretty close. And I mean, I don't know. It was a little, I don't know about that. It was a little, I understand. But it can still make you squirm a little bit. But, so the movie ends, like I said, with her and him faking her own death. Now, they did this by having her videotaping, she's carrying her luggage, like she just arrived, carrying her luggage and videotaping the path, and then showing her being attacked by someone, him, who then kills her on camera, and her body's gone. And they take and leave the camera out on the road. So she faked her own death so that she could now be the new matron, the new protector of this coven of vampires. And so that was really interesting. The vampires won, you know. So I guess you could say the vampires were the good guys in this movie for a change. Um, that was pretty interesting. Yeah, so she faked her own death. And then the credits roll with the newscaster having found the footage. You know, the footage has been found. And so they're showing news reports and newscasters of this famous journalist who was murdered on camera and disappeared. You know, she's gone, and that the police were still looking into the matter, but she was presumed dead and never be found. And of course, you know, she's become the matron of this little coven. So, boy, I've rambled on about this movie, haven't I? Okay. So there you go. Children of the Night. There's lots more fascinating stuff in it. If you can find this movie, if you are a fan of vampire movies, or just strange little horror movies in general, Children of the Night is the way it is marketed in America. This movie is absolutely fantastic for a little indie vampire film. As you've seen, I usually don't ramble on through so much detail in that, but this movie really fascinated me. I really, really had a good time with this movie. I had a really good time with the lore, you know. I really liked the way they explained stuff, you know, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating listening to these little vampire kids talk about how different people's blood tastes, and that you must be silly for thinking I would be bored because, you know, there's a smorgasbord of blood tastes out there that you can enjoy, and, you know. And so yeah, I think this had some unusual approaches in a vampire film, and I think that you will think so too. But I really appreciate you listening to me ramble on about this movie. I actually loved this movie. 2014, Children of the Night. The original title was Limbo, because that's what they call the orphanages. In America, it's known as Children of the Night. You can find this on eBay. You can find it, or I did, at Walmart. I think they had 3 copies left or something, and I grabbed one. But I would have bought it off eBay anyway. You might be able to rent it somewhere. I don't know. I don't do that kind of stuff. So, but you know, check the rental places some of y'all use. You might be able to do it there. Now, on the International Movie Database page, it says watch on Tubi. That's the place with the commercials, yeah. You might be able to watch it for free. I'm adding it to my hidden indie gems. I gave it an 8, okay? I really like this movie. It does, yeah. I don't know. Is it coming up? I was just saying for y'all if it come up or not. I hate the way it wants to sign me in with Google. I don't know, it took me there, but then it like just went to the main page. But in any event, I could check. Yeah, it's there. It says TV 14. Is that right? TV 14? Do I think this is TV 14? I don't know. There was some gory stuff in this movie to be TV 14. There wasn't no nudity. No, there wasn't no nudity, but there was some dirty talk. Very suggestive talk. Maybe the people that rate movies didn't catch it, you know? Maybe it went over their head. But anyway, so there you go. You can watch this on Tubi, it says, but personally I prefer to support the director in the theaters. The director. I prefer to support the director and the actors and everything by buying the movie. But I guess you could watch it, and if you liked it, you could support it by buying it. In any event, I appreciate it very much. Next, I'm going to talk about two. We don't have enough horror movies that are like war themed or military themed, and I'm going to be doing my next vids on Ghosts of War, which I fucking love that movie, and a little lesser known one called Red Sands that I thought is fantastic. I'm gonna do those. But yeah, I'm gonna do these two little war horror movies that are based in war. One's about a jinn that gets turned loose on an Afghan type situation in the desert, Middle East, and the other is like World War II ghost movie, sort of like The Others. But yeah, so let me shut this off before it's 5,000 hours long. But I appreciate your time. My God, did I spend an hour talking about that movie? Jesus. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one. Love you, miss you, bye.